Hello again, and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Would you believe me if I said that you and I, we all are being controlled by the sun? Sun's surface is said to influence all the biological and the social activities on Earth. There are, as you know, dark blotches on the surface of the sun. As observed and recorded for over 2,000 years, but have been studied in more detail since the introduction of telescopes in astronomy, as early as 17th century. Those dark blotches are known to be sunspots, and they come and go in cycles, once every 11.1 years, and closely associated with the solar flares. In those times, intense outbursts on the sun's surface and a huge range of radiation is observed, thus leading to the question, why do they appear as they do? Where and when? And how they affect life on Earth. In truth, this is not fully understood, even now. Now, those sunspots become visible first as dark holes in the swirling surface of the sun. Some of them cluster together to form different and larger groups. And those groups, as you know, can be as large as several times of the diameter of the planet Earth. They can also merge together and form larger spots, at least 7,000 or more million square miles, or 18,000 million square kilometers or more. These sunspots are dark in appearance, but because they are about, let's say, 2,000 degrees Celsius, that is about 3,632 Fahrenheit degrees cooler than the surrounding areas. And this conclusion is estimated by arbitrary formula with the result expressed as what is known to be a wolf number, after the Swiss astronomer Rudolf Wolf, who originally devised the method the way back in 1852. They vary from 0 to 300 and may increase rapidly. And the fluctuation is formed the small peak within the usual overall cycle. The main sunspot cycle, as we briefly made mention of, averages 11.1 years in length, although individual cycles also ranged from 7 to 17 years is observed. There is also a long cycle, or 179 years, related to the movements of the sun about the center of the mass of this solar system. Additionally, there is a 25 months sunspot cycle linked to the changes in the rate of emissions of subatomic particles known as neutrinos from the deep interior of the solar body. Disturbing the planet Earth. Some extremely orthodox scientists are beginning to recognize that sunspots influence the Earth in fairly well understood ways. Now, solar flares, certain outbursts of energy that occur as well as the sunspots, and electrically charged particles that proceed from them may cause auroral displays, as you know, in the Earth's atmosphere. And they look marvelous, beautiful indeed in looks, in their appearance. However, they can cause fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field. A major flare of this kind may even bring about new changes in Earth's rotation. Believe it or not. It's a costly attempt at studying the sun because it was actually brought to a premature end by sunspot activity. The about 10-ton American Skylab space station, if you remember, which was empty after having been occupied by a number of crews on scientific missions and was circling the Earth way back in 1979. Solar activity affected the Earth's atmosphere and caused it to expand and increased the drag experienced by the Skylab. As a result, the craft broke up and fell to Earth over Western Australia. Yeah. Here is yet another question. What else is the sun doing to us other than looking at the previous space station out of orbit and putting an occasional brake on the Earth's rotation? Question mark. That's a good question. The close correlation that has now been established between the solar cycle and variations in the Earth's magnetic field, and which may also imply corresponding influence on life on the planet Earth. There is now generally accepted evidence that Earth's magnetic field affects a wide variety of processes in all manner of living things. In fact, everything from microorganisms to the human beings. And the electromagnetic ecology is now considered to be a scientific discipline on its own right. According to Soviet scientist Dr. A.P. Dobrov, the nervous system, the human skin's electrical resistance, blood count, blood clotting rate, heart and eye function, onset and duration of a woman's menstrual period, and even the incidence of the population of neurosis, epilepsy, and schizophrenias all can be affected by variations that may occur in the Earth's magnetic field. Within the experiments, which lasted more than 20 years, a Dr. Maki Takata of Japan was able to show that blood clotting rates respond precisely and immediately to both short and long-term cycles in solar activity. Not surprisingly, man is a living sundial, he concluded. His findings supported those of Professor Giorgio Picardi of Florence in Italy concerning ordinary water. Picardi claimed, after conducting thousands of tests throughout the entire solar cycle, that the rate of certain chemical processes in water exactly matches day-to-day sunspot counts. The occurrence of magnetic storms and that of solar flares. The process in question was the precipitation from water or a dissolved compound. That is, the substance involved, bismuth oxychloride, if you're familiar with, came out of solution and formed a solid deposit. Picardi then turned his attention to blood and found that its coagulation time could be increased by up to 50%, simply by shielding it from the Earth's magnetic field. All living beings, he concluded, are bound more intimately to the external world than one would think. But claims of Takata and Picardi have been supported by numerous reports from the former Soviet Union. It is now known as CIS, where heliobiology, that is the study of the sun's influence on life, is an accepted discipline. Scientists that are particularly interested in the so-called Kursk anomaly in the region around the Russian city of Kursk. The Earth's magnetic field reaches 3 times its average strength there. The incidence of certain diseases is 160% higher than the average and yields a wide range of crops. They are consistently lower. Overall, there have been a few attempts in the West to follow up the Soviet research in heliobiology. However, there have been some surprises. The report published in the prestigious scientific journal titled Nature, for instance, described a significant correlation between fluctuations in terrestrial magnetic field and emergency cardiac admissions to about 2 Indian hospitals that occurred over a 6-year period. This lends some support to Dubrov's claim, based on at least 14 Soviet studies, that magnetic storms are one of the direct causes of cardiovascular accidents. In other words, he was talking about the heart attacks. But some of the boldest claims in this field were made by the late Russian scientist A.L. Chizevsky. He studied sunspots for about 10 years and correlated their appearance with his own state of health, declaring, "We must assume that there exists a powerful factor outside our globe which governs the developments of events in human societies and synchronizes them with the sun's activity. We must assume that the electrical energy of the sun is the super-terrestrial factor which influences historical processes." He supported this startling claim with a mess of evidence covering 2,400 years. It revealed, he said, the existence of a universal cycle of historical events, locked to that of the sun. Each cycle came in 4 phases of roughly equal duration, he said. In the first, people were peaceful but apathic. And the second, new ideas and leaders emerged. In the third, coinciding with a maximum of solar activity, nations reached maximum excitability, realizing their greatest achievements, good or bad. While in the fourth, everybody became exhausted and slipped into the first phase of the next cycle. Chizevsky believed he had found cycles everywhere in the immigrations of Jews, the outbreaks of diphtheria, and influenza epidemics, strikes, terrorism, all major wars, and even the voting patterns in some countries. Absurd as some of these claimed correlations may seem, Chizevsky might not have been surprised by the coincidence of maximum solar sunspot activity And, for instance, the Soviet invasions of Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Afghanistan, the agitation by Polish workers in 1980, and is still officially unexplained influenza pandemics in 1957 and 1968. Even pandemics we have recently experienced can be classified in this field. There seems to be some correlation between the world events and solar activities. Only recently we have heard some even considering the polar shifts of the sun. One person who put the study of sunspots to essentially practical use was J.H. Nelson, and he was the chief analyst of shortwave radio propagating for RCA communications in New York. He must have studied them carefully and probably even astutely for more than 20 years, until his retirement. Before the days of satellite communication, as we know, radio companies were at the mercy of the sun. For the state of the ionosphere, affected by the range and quality of shortwave radio, shortwave radio communication, after careful observations and study of the sunspots and solar flares, Nelson made an important discovery. We are being told that he announced that some sunspots heralded radio blackouts, while others did not. Looking more closely at the disruptive maverick sunspots, as he called them, Nelson made an even more important discovery. They were invariably associated with certain positions of the planets. We need to realize that Nelson was not a professional astronomer, and certainly not an astrologer, but a technician with a practical job to do. Eventually, he was able to announce that there was a direct relationship between bad radio weather, severe magnetic storms, and planetary angles. Moreover, the so-called maverick angles of 0 to 90 degrees and 180 coincided with the traditionally unfavorable angles of astrology, while the favorable angles of 60 degrees and 120 degrees were also favorable in astrology. By taking into account the positions of all the planets, even distant Pluto, Nelson eventually achieved, as he believed, an accuracy of 85% in the forecast. He was able to give of radio weather. His chief also acknowledged his work to have been an enormous importance to his company. Nelson never discovered the nature of the influence that could cause this relationship. However, planets raise tides on the surface of the sun by gravitational attractions. But these are extremely minute. Furthermore, the gravitational fields of the planets differ considerably from each other. That of Jupiter is, for example, over 30 times stronger than that of Mercury. And is much closer to the Sun. Yet Nelson found that his forecasting system worked only when all the planets were taken into account. Gravity could not give them all an equal vote in this manner. So Nelson was led to conclude, somewhat lamely, that unknown forces were involved in the process. Whether or not the radiation from solar flares reaches us according to a timetable that is drawn up by the planets, it certainly has a direct effect on our magnetic environment. And this is known to affect many biological processes. Such radiations are not the only influence on worldwide events, but it is a cycle or cyclic influence and may well determine the timing of a variety of occurrences, such as heart attacks, influenza epidemics, including COVID-19, the very moment of birth, or even the rise of political and religious movements. In many ways, it seems, we may all be slaves of the sun after all. I will now leave it with you. Till we meet again, by the next episode. Keep smiling and Be happy. Thank you.